their constitutional rights?
You bet.
Is that the basis of the militia movement?
That is not the basis of the militia movement, but that is a concern right now.
Would you elaborate on that?
Sure. One of the things that was mentioned here earlier, I think Senator Specter mentioned it. He said, were the militias a threat to the federal government? And I says, gee, you walk outside of 495 and the question's the other way around. Is the government a threat to the militia? The militia is everybody. It's just a law in which people form themselves a group to self-defense and for their security. Okay? It's not to wage war, but if a war is waged, these groups plan on winning. And let me tell you something else. Speaking of this, you're saying, should this be looked into? It's a mindset. I was at a gun range earlier this year, and they happened to be firing machine guns that they owned lawfully. And we have people, I'm talking law enforcement, I'm talking military, we have a lot of sympathetic people in those branches who all were down there with their firearms and with the awesome display of firepower that I saw down there, and that was just one iota of it. Okay? I say this sincerely, I don't mean to direct this at anybody here, but a lot of people see what's coming down. They see some of the executive orders that are being thrown at them, some of the statements that are being made directed toward the American public.
What form do you think is most likely for this warfare to be launched against the people?
In what form?
Yeah, and I mean, you mentioned instances, obviously, where that you're very much concerned about the Waco incident and things of that nature, but do you see something on a more organized basis or a more pervasive basis in terms of what the government might do to the citizens?
Right. It isn't just about Waco and Ruby Ridge. When you hear things about, there was a survey out in 29 Palms, California, in which military officers were asked, if necessary, would they shoot on Americans who refuse to give up their firearms? In any other country, that constitutes a serious threat. Military is not to be used with law enforcement. And there are certain inalienable rights people just aren't going to give up. This is the problem we face here. Even if you say, hey, this is a real bad idea, these guys are a bad idea, and we ought to go just stomp their heads in, you got a problem because they're going to shoot back. And I can tell when those other officers were up here, it was a serious concern. Even though, hey, we all want to preserve our constitutional rights, okay? If there's nuts out there, heck, we'll probably find them before you do and turn them over to you. But as far as the mainstream approach of this thing, and when we hear about some of the plans or ideas that they would like to see happen to us, okay, now I have seen them take place. For instance, I'm talking about Brunswick, Ohio. We had one gentleman who got his door knocked on. He said, no, go back and get a warrant. It's under the Constitution. Get a warrant, get probable cause. Okay, the result was he kicked his door in 7 times. So this person with a legally owned weapon shot him. She said it was a police officer. If a police officer kicks down my door with no warrant, no probable cause, what am I supposed to do?
Incidents like that have happened throughout the course of history. Will continue to happen.
The result.
My question is: do you perceive and are you concerned about a more organized, more pervasive effort by the government against individuals or groups or whoever, in what form it might take? Could I ask Mr. Adams that question, or maybe some of the others?
Yeah, I would like to respond to a few of these things. I don't know that I necessarily perceive that the government is planning some conspiracy, if you will, to attack the militias. I do have a question and would like a response. I know you may not be able to respond to me today. This goes back to March 25th of this year, and I know that some of you senators are aware at least of the allegations, and that's what I'd like to know, if they were allegations or if they were true, because this is the answer to your question. There was a proposed or an allegation that the Attorney General, Janet Reno, was going to attack several militia leaders in this country on March 25th. There were several senators that wrote to the Attorney General concerning this and asked her not to do this. My question is, I don't know if it was going to take place or not. If it was going to
do what, Mr. Adams?
To attack several militia leaders.
You mean arrest?
Attack was the word. Attack, yes. And I'm not saying that this was going to take place. I'm saying that I've seen the letters that the senators have written to her. I've seen copies of them. They've been on television.
Do you have those copies with you?
I do not know.
Would you provide them to us?
I will provide where you can get them. I do not personally have them, but I will do that. They do have them.
those, and we will
Do you have
supply
them
those.
with you?
No, sir, we don't.
So the question is, I don't know if that was real or whether it was rumor or what, but I will say that it was a tremendous concern to a lot of people across the country.
That they were going to be attacked.
That they were going to be attacked, right. Now, I personally could not believe that it could be possible in this country, because we were violating no laws. As I mentioned earlier, we operate within the law, and we believe in that. So if we were going to be attacked, it was certainly something very, very ominous to take place from our government. But it was widespread enough that some Congress representatives did inquire of Ms. Reno about this, and
She did not respond.
She did not respond. We would like a response. If it was real, then of course we would really like to know why such a thing was taking place. If it wasn't real, then just respond to it, and that's the answer. And that's one of the problems I think that we have today, is there's a lot of questions with few answers. And I think if we could expose something, you've heard a lot of allegations from people here today. Maybe they're real, maybe they're not. If they're real, then let's expose them. If they're not, then let's expose them. And that's why I think this is a healthy forum that we have here today, because we have started some communication.
Well, Mr. Adams, I know of no such proposal by the Attorney General to attack anyone. It sounds far-fetched to me.
And
if you have letters from senators, I'd like to see them.
Yeah, and I do agree with you that it sounds far-fetched, but the letters do exist.
Well, let's see them. Let us turn now to Senator Feinstein.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is my first occasion to be able to talk with militia members. So I'm a newcomer, and I've listened very carefully to what has been said here today. And what I gather from it is that, as you put it, Mr. Johnson, people are ticked off, irritated, annoyed, upset, whatever you may say, about a variety of things having to do with, quote, government, whether it's law enforcement or decision makers or anything else. What I'd like to have each one of you answer is, assuming this is correct, do you believe there are circumstances in which you can take the law into your own hands? Mr. Tokman, let's go down.
I'm sorry, it's Truckman.
Excuse me, Mr. Truckman.
Like a vehicle. No, ma'am, I don't. Nobody should be an island unto himself, nor a law unto himself.
So you believe there are no circumstances where individuals should take the law into their own hands?
There is one. When
What
someone comes to destroy my family, I won't have a choice. If that were ever to happen, I would defend to the last drop of blood.
Okay.
And I would expect any other American to do the same thing. And I'm told that you have a concealed weapons permit, so I guess you probably feel the same way we do.
Well, let me put that aside. I do not have a concealed weapon permit.
Well, you recently had one.
No, I had one in the 1970s. I have not had one since then, after a terrorist incident that took place involving myself. That was the only time I had a concealed weapon permit, so I'm happy to set that one straight.
Well, I apologize. I'll have to go back to my California informers.
I think you will. Let me move on. Mr. Fletcher, do you believe there are any circumstances under which you or your followers can take the law into their own hands?
Commonly, absolutely not, and we do not at any time espouse that in any way, shape, or form. However, we are, and again, it's totally, as in the militia Montana, we're predominantly educational in nature, and by that I mean that's what we do mostly. You will not find us out in our camos and that type of thing very regularly at all. No, normally, and at no time have we ever espoused any such action. You know, we are, however, a defensive kind of a concept, if you will, and I suppose there could be some bizarre situation like the unconstitutional suspension of the Constitution that might therefore appear that people are going to take things.
Okay.
Yes.
Mr. Adams?
There is no time for any people to go against the laws of their government and to take those laws into their own hands. That is totally unacceptable in any society, and we certainly and fully agree with that. One of the questions that was brought up about this particular meeting here today was, how many people are involved with the militia? And I think some earlier testimony, that was kind of hard to put a finger on. I can personally tell you that from my office alone, we have helped establish over 1,000 lawful militia units throughout the country in all 50 states. And I know that all of these people that I've talked to and that I talk to throughout the nation agree with the statements I'm making right now, that we must be law-abiding. The only exception to that, which I believe has already been stated, is for self-preservation and self-defense of our persons and family if an unlawful act were being perpetrated against us.
All right, Mr. Johnson.
I'd say there'll only be two occasions. First one is if, once again, if you come into somebody's house, shooting.
Without a warrant and without reasonable cause.
Without a warrant, without a reasonable cause. And it would be awfully nice if they came in the house with the warrant. It would be nice if they would knock politely. But other than that, I don't see a reason for using any kind of force to justify your actions. And of course, once again, you suspend the Constitution. Then for that reason, I don't have to recognize anybody in federal law enforcement. If we're invaded for some reason and our government's overthrown by a foreign power, we're going to have to take the law into our own hands to save it.
Mr. Olson?
I would agree completely with what J.J. Johnson has said, that there is no other reason to take law into one's own hands unless it's for the preservation of himself or the property, his family. What we have done, and this is how I deal with the law, and I recognize the law and submit to the law, we have empowered and encouraged our sheriffs. We provide the evidence. This book that I would like to present to this Senate subcommittee is about 6 pages, 6 pounds of evidence that will conclusively show this committee the corruption in government. And I would like the committee to have this book. Now you who represent this government, you who have formed this Senate body, and you who are concerned about the laws, now this is the way that I deal with it. Here's the evidence. You carry out your responsibility for the law.
Okay, may I go on and ask another question?
Yes,
and
you may. To take whatever time you need, Senator Feinstein.
Oh, thank you very much. Mr. Olson, you're wearing a uniform, and that uniform says you are a commander. What is it that you command?
Ours is an organization of command communication. Serving in the military, we understand what is called command control communication, because there is a control that must be exercised in the organized military. We in the militia have command communication in that we convey information down to the lowest level so that reasonable, intelligent human beings can make an informed decision.
Do you command people?
No, I am a commander only in what is called a unity of command, so that a person reports to another person all the way up and down the chain. Let's call it a simple line of communication or echelon of communication. There is no command
and
control.
What do these people communicate about? Communicate
information. The information now available to the American public is extraordinary. Is extraordinary in that we are available now through alternative sources of news to convey truth to the American people. I believe that what you're seeing in America in the last 3 or 4 years is a phenomena of informed Americans now waking up. A new conscience is building in America.
I don't mean to stop you, but I've got so many questions. Yes. I want to ask you about what it is, practically what it is you do. Do the people in your organization stockpile weapons?
I wouldn't say stockpiling. No one should have more than they should need.
How many weapons does an individual need?
It depends upon the threat that they perceive.
So is it fair to say that there could be unlimited numbers of weapons?
Possibly. The old adage in the military is that accuracy is everything.
And what do you do with these weapons?
Prepare ourselves to defend ourselves, ma'am. We are not offensive. We are defensive, purely defensive.
So everybody is trained in how to use these weapons?
No, ma'am. In the community that we call the militia, there are 2 parts of the militia. That which we call the patriot body, those people that are more concerned about information, seminars, videotapes, information. And then there is the militia who may be involved in the weekend maneuvers. That is what you see in the press often. What you don't see in this vast grouping of Americans concerned about the Constitution are the religious right, for example. They're very much concerned. The patriot community, the information community, they're very much concerned. But what you do see is that small portion of people called the militia who exercise on the weekends.
And under what circumstances would this command operation that you have sanction the use of these weapons?
Excellent question, ma'am. We will defer to the lawful historic authority, which is the county sheriff. He indeed is the commander of the local militia. And when a situation erupts in which we would be deputized...
Does he participate with you?
No, he cannot because, of course, of his political nature. He cannot always, but he is normally in support of, knowing the historic role of our sheriffs. In the event that the county were to be endangered, he could deputize a ready posse, and he could form the militia to defend the people. That's what the historic militia is all about.
And what would this county be afraid of?
The county could be afraid of, for example, there are 53 federal agencies right now that employ deadly force. They carry weapons and they can make arrests using deadly force.
But supposing they had warrants?
That may not necessarily be what the county would be with best interest of the people in the county. For example, our county sheriff does not know when federal officials come into the county to search, seize, or arrest until he sees it on the nightly news. We have a bill before our House, or we're trying to seek support for it. Perhaps you've heard of it, the No More Wacos bill, or the sheriff empowerment legislation, which would require federal agencies to get permission from the local county sheriffs before they could come into the county. In other words, coordinate their activities with the county sheriff. There are, of course, some exceptions to that rule, which would involve necessarily the investigation of the sheriff himself, for example.
I believe my time is up, Mr. Chairman. I'll wait for the next round.
Senator Feinstein, I don't think we're going to have another round because the vote starts in just a few minutes. If you want to
Could I ask one other question?
Yes.
Do you believe there are any circumstances in which an individual has a right to blow up a building? And let's start with you, Mr. Truckman.
Absolutely not, Mrs. Feinstein. Absolutely not. We are plain and simple a neighborhood watch, watching out for problems. When we encounter what we perceive as threats to a peaceful society, we do something about it.
Well, let me ask you this. If you're plain and simple, why do I read constantly these violent quotes, this hatred for other people, this anti-Semitic, anti-black, driving people to have this intense fear and antagonism?
Would you like my black friend to answer that for you? I'm sick and tired of these questions constantly.
I asked you why.
We have gone over it and over it and over it, and if you want to blame somebody about it, take a look at the press. We're telling them one thing, they're telling you something else. I already addressed it.
So you're saying you don't say these things?
No, ma'am, I do not say that.
Okay.
We're all in this
That's
together.
all I wanted to know. So all those comments are wrong.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Feinstein, what we're saying is we are all in this together. America better put away its differences or we'll cease to have a country. We shouldn't be your side and my side. We should all be for the same, the betterment of our country and for our fellow countrymen. That's all I'm saying.
Mr. Fletcher?
Well, it's pretty much the
circumstances on which...
The same answer. No, absolutely not. And I don't mean that your question's ludicrous, but that it is a little bit, and I don't mean that as an insult. I don't think anybody could perceive that point in time where that would make sense, particularly if we're talking the housing of infants and that type of thing. And the press, which Mr. Trockman refers to, shows Mr. Trockman's face and one of the other Patriot leaders' face and the blown-up babies, and then just leaves it hang there. And that's, unfortunately, we can't sue for that. And if we could, it would look like the national debt in terms of a legal action. And as far as the racial thing is concerned, that's garbage. Those folks in the extreme radical fringes of the Patriot movement, which is a cross-section of Americana, same as the police forces, 10% of every police force is either racially motivated, racist persons. They're doing drugs, doing prostitution, or stealing on the side. And it's probably the same in the militia movement because it's a cross-section of Americana. We stand down from any hate kind of rhetoric whatsoever, period. And my wife of 25 years was Jewish and Italian. My business partners for 4 or 5 different years were blacks. and my granddaughter is half American Indian. So if I'm racist, I am doing a lousy job of it.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Adams?
We certainly in no way would ever condone, as I said earlier, any type of violence, and of course that would include a bombing. I would ask each of you that as you watch the media report upon us, and you've probably seen many of our faces many times, listen for those words of racism from our mouth. You have not heard it. You will not hear it. And if we hear of anyone in our organization speaking of hate or speaking of racism, they will be asked to leave and never return because we do not condone it. The press will go out and find some fringe element out there that may say something, but trust me and believe me, it is not part of our mainstream organization. And as I said earlier, there are going to be some people that will try to ride our coattails because we are before the press. My gosh, we're before you today. And that's a lot of public knowledge. And they're going to try to grab some of that, and we will try to eliminate it wherever we can. But you pay very close attention to what the media has to say. And certainly as politicians, you've been soundbited. You know exactly what we're talking about. But you watch what we say out of our own mouth, and that's what's true.
Mr. Johnson?
Yeah, first it's a question about blowing up a building.
Are there any circumstances under which an individual is justified to blow up any building?
After you've evacuated it and you wanted to cover up the evidence. Other than that, let me talk about the racist aspect now. It's getting old. I'm getting real tired of being called a Klan member. I'm getting tired of being called a member of the Aryan Nations group. I spoke 2 weeks ago down to Lincoln Memorial along with 2 other black people and the Jews for the Preservation of Firearms, and I believe there was somebody else Jewish who helped organize it, and the reports came out that a racist, anti-Semitic militia group held a rally on the Lincoln Memorial. Are these people blind, or is there an agenda afoot here? Okay? There are more black people showing up every day. A lot of the things that these people sit around in these meetings, these so-called right-wing wackos, and talk about, happen daily in black communities. And black communities know this. The first people concerned seriously about neighborhood house-to-house searches and seizures were over in Chicago. They were black. Good grief, almost half the people in Waco who got killed were black. This movement isn't about guns and skin color. It's about liberty. It's about freedom. Amen. The same kind of legislation we're seeing coming down on everybody now came down on blacks just after the Civil War. That's why they're getting involved in this thing. And it's going to come eventually to somebody, you know, as you keep ignoring us and saying, well, these guys are just a bunch of angry white men. Well,
pardon me for interrupting, but they have started the vote now, so we're going to have to conclude in just a few minutes.
Okay.
If I could, Mr. Olson, would you respond to that?
The answer is absolutely not. Absolutely not. Our record stands for itself. The FBI will give you all the evidence concerning the Michigan Militia Corps on that question.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Well, the vote has started, so we're going to have to conclude very shortly. There have been a lot of very serious charges made, and we would like a specification to the extent that you gentlemen would like to make them. I would ask you, Mr. Fletcher, when you talk about other explosions in the federal building and another John Doe, to give us the specifics. You've given us some materials. We will take a look at them. Mr. Olson, you have made a charge that what Senator Cole pointed up about a picture of Adolf Hitler, all in favor of gun control, raise your right hand, being Jewish copyrighted.
That is from the Jews for the Preservation of Firearm Gun Ownership out of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and that is a copyrighted document.
And what's your authority that it's Jewish?
A letter that was came out in JPFO's newsletter about a month ago. And I'll be glad to give you a copy.
From whom?
From the director of JPFO.
Would you please submit a copy?
We will have it on your desk within the week, sir.
I'd be glad to get into the issue you raised about the single bullet theory. If you want to write to me, I will respond to you in detail. I'm sorry we don't have the time with the vote starting. Mr. Adams, you have made a comment about the organization of militias in all 50 states, and I would ask this of you and of all the other members present, if you would provide this committee in writing all the information you have about where the militias are, how many there are in each state, where their names are, what their membership is, what their purposes are, if there is anything in writing about them, if there is to give us some specification to the extent you can as to what weapons they have. And I'm not making any suggestion if there are any violations of law, but we'd like to know as much specifically as we can about this question. This hearing, I think, has been illuminating.
Perhaps you'll allow Ken Adams to give you a response to that question if he will provide you with that in-depth information.
I certainly would be appreciative if Mr. Ken Adams would do that. My own view, as I suggested in a brief exchange with Mr. Olson, is that let it all come out. Let it all hang out. Let's see
Could I respond to your question, sir? To your request, and be brief.
If you can, briefly, the votes have started.
You have asked for lists of people and lists of memberships and things of this information. I cannot provide that.
No, I haven't asked for a list of membership or lists of people. Okay. I'm not asking for that. Okay. I'm asking for total numbers. This committee would like to make an assessment.
I will do the best
as to what the strength of the militia's strengths are.
I will provide everything that I possibly can to you that would not violate personal privacy.
We're not asking you for any individual names that you don't want to provide. We're not asking you for violations of any personal privacy.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Ms. Trockman, you had something you wanted to add?
Yes, sir. I can add that we will provide you with the numbers of the people that we work with in leadership across the country, concerned citizens, and it will stagger your imagination, I guarantee you. America is upset, and we are a valve to help control them till we can find a way to solve this. Please be thankful that we are here. We love our country. We love our form of government. There is no better on earth. We're here to support the righteous government.
I would like an answer from each of you, too, in writing, if you'd provide it. As a follow-up to Mr. Johnson said, that there's only time between now and armed conflict. You have all said that you respect the democratic process and the ballot box as a way of changing our institutions. And the only limitations when asked about violence was essentially a statement about self-defense. To the extent that you know of any others who disagree and do plan violence, to the extent you would provide that to this committee, we would be interested to know that. This is the first hearing that we have on this subject, and we will be pursuing the matter further. You have something more you want to say, Mr. Trockman?
Sir, we are already doing that with federal agencies.
That's correct, yes. We have provided...
Well, all right. Provide them to federal agencies is fine. If you provide them to this subcommittee, we are interested to know, too, because we're trying to make an assessment of the extent of the militias, how many people, not necessarily specific identity, what their firepower is, what their purposes are, and whether they pose any threat, and whether there's any justification for further legislation on the subject, either at the state, local, or at the federal level. But this is the first hearing. This is the fourth hearing which this subcommittee has held on problems of terrorism generally.
Can I make one real brief statement? Given the very brief.
Make it real.
Okay. I can assure you, sir, and to all members of Congress and to all the people of this nation, that the militia does not constitute any threat to this nation.
Well, we have that assurance, Mr. Adams, but you'll forgive us if we don't want to accept it at face value. We want to look further.
Mr. Inspector, if please, I wonder if we may be able to have an insurance that we would have an open door to get to you folks relative to the same fear that we have relative to a government that maybe the people are no longer trusting.
You have an open door to this subcommittee. Any additional information you wish to provide to us, we would be glad to have.
Thank you, sir.
Let me make one brief comment about a press advisory which I have just seen from Congressman Schumer commenting about these hearings. There will be follow-up, and we'd be glad to have any suggestions that Congressman Schumer might have. And note that we had testimony from Rabbi Heyer, the dean and founder of the Simon Wiesenthal Center, earlier in our hearings on terrorism. and a concluding statement that at least my own view is that a public airing of grievances that the citizens have is a very useful and very healthy thing. There is in the Constitution, beyond the more frequently quoted freedom of speech, religion, and press, the right of the citizenry to petition the Congress. And we are interested in what you have to say. Much of it you've already heard is there's disagreement with the panel, and I would express that same disagreement. And my own view is whatever ideas you have, let's get them out in the open. And I believe that, if I may say just one or two words in a conclusory fashion, that much of what has been said here today will fall of its own weight. But let's hear about it. And I think if we hear you out, we may decrease your membership. But it's a free society. We all have a right to speak, and let the American people draw their conclusions. And my own sense is that it is healthy, and America will applaud letting you speak your piece, no matter how much we disagree with you. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
The Senate passed the anti-terrorism bill last week, 91-8. The House will take up the anti-terrorism bill in July.